The recreation bay of the starbound horizon buzzed with different voices and languages. Soldiers from 6 different species sat around metal tables, their armor stacked nearby. The long journey to the Outer Rim territories had been boring, and everyone needed something to break the endless days of space travel. Captain Jake Morrison sat with his back against the wall, watching the mixed group of warriors. His weathered face showed the lines of 20 years in combat. Gray touched his brown hair at the temples, and old scars marked his hands. Next to him, Lieutenant Amy Carter studied a data pad, her sharp blue eyes taking in everything around them. She was young but already known for her brilliant tactical mind. Sergeant Pete Rodriguez shuffled a deck of cards while telling jokes to a small group of HFY soldiers. The reptilian aliens laughed in their strange hissing way, enjoying Pete's stories about training accidents back on Earth. Dr. Lisa Bennett sat nearby, making notes about alien social behavior while pretending to read a medical journal. The bay held about 60 soldiers total. Humans made up only 12 of them. The rest were HFY reptilians, insectoid Havtar, gaseous Nefka in their environmental suits, stone-like Breaktoll, and a few others. This was the Alliance's new experiment. In mixed species combat units, Sub-Commander Zerani dominated one table with her clicking voice. The Havtar looked like a giant praying mantis covered in blue-black armor plating. Her 4 arms gestured as she told stories of great Havtar victories. Other aliens listened with respect. The Havtar were known as fierce warriors across the galaxy. The Queen's Guard held the pass for 3 days against 10,000 enemies. Zerani clicked proudly. We ate their dead and used their bones as weapons when ammunition ran out. This is what real warriors do. The young HFY soldiers made impressed sounds. Trooper Gaxlon, barely past his first molting, stared at Zerani with obvious admiration. His golden scales still held the bright color of youth, not yet darkened by battle experience. Commander Vexthel, the senior HFY officer, nodded approvingly. His dark green scales were scarred from many battles. The Havtar have always been mighty fighters. During the border wars, I saw a single Havtar warrior take down a whole squad of pirates. More stories followed. A Breaktoll soldier described how his people fought for weeks without food, feeding off minerals in cave walls. A Nefka officer told of battles in the void of space, where his people fought without ships or suits. Each tale was bloodier and more impossible than the last. The aliens tried to outdo each other with stories of endurance, strength, and victory against overwhelming odds. The humans listened quietly, not joining in the bragging. Finally, Gaxlan turned to Morrison. What about humans, Captain? Do your people have warrior stories? Morrison looked up from cleaning his sidearm. He studied the expectant faces around him. Amy Carter glanced up from her datapad, curious to see what he would say. We have some stories, Morrison said simply. Tell us one, Zerani demanded, her compound eyes glittering. We want to hear what soft mammals consider heroic. Morrison set down his weapon and leaned back. Ever heard of the Battle of Kepler Station? The aliens shook their heads. Human history was not well known outside Earth's solar system. Kepler Station was a mining outpost on the edge of human space, Morrison began. Important place, controlled the shipping lanes to 3 systems. Pirates knew if they took it, they could choke off trade to a dozen worlds. The soldiers settled into listen. Even the humans paid attention, though Pete Rodriguez smiled like he had heard this story before. The station had a single battalion of Marines for defense, 300 soldiers. Standard rotation, nothing special about them. Mix of veterans and new recruits, just like any unit. Morrison paused to take a drink of water. Intelligence missed the pirate buildup. When the attack came, it was not a few raider ships. It was a whole armada, 50 vessels, maybe more. Over 5,000 pirates, all armed and angry. Gaxlan's eyes widened. 5,000 against 300? The odds were bad, Morrison agreed. Station commander tried to evacuate, but the civilians could not get out fast enough. Pirates jammed communications, so no distress signal got through. The Marines were on their own. Zarani made a dismissive clicking sound, so they surrendered. Smart choice against impossible odds. Morrison shook his head. They fought. For how long? Commander Vexthal asked. He sounded genuinely curious. 6 days. Silence fell over the recreation bay. Even the card games at other tables stopped as soldiers turned to listen. 6 days? Gaxalon repeated. But that is impossible. No force can hold against such numbers for 6 days without reinforcement. Morrison continued as if the young Kethfer had not spoken. The Marines turned the station into a fortress. Every corridor became a killing ground. Every room was a strong point. They used the mining equipment as weapons, the ventilation systems as troop movement routes. Amy Carter set down her datapad completely now, watching Morrison tell the story. She had read the official reports, but hearing Jake tell it was different. The pirates expected to take the station in hours, Morrison said. Instead, they got pulled into urban combat. Every advance cost them dozens of fighters. The Marines would fall back, set traps, hit them from unexpected angles. But surely the defenders ran out of ammunition, a Brechtol soldier rumbled. They improvised, made explosives from mining charges, used maintenance tools as weapons. When they ran low on medical supplies, they kept fighting wounded. Some Marines fought for 3 days straight with broken bones. Zarani's mandibles clicked. In disbelief. Mammals cannot fight for 3 days without rest. Your biology does not allow it. The Marines did not sleep much, Morrison admitted. They took turns in 2-hour shifts, ate while manning their positions. The wounded who could still hold weapons stayed in the fight. Dr. Bennett looked up from her notes. She wanted to support her fellow humans but knew the medical facts. Captain, human physiology has limits. Extended combat without proper rest causes breakdown of cognitive function and motor skills. Morrison nodded to her. You are right, Doctor. The Marines were not operating at peak efficiency by day 4. But they were still fighting. What happened on day 6? Gaxalone asked, caught up in the story despite himself. Alliance fleet arrived. Found the station still in Marine hands. Pirates had lost over half their force and were talking about retreat when our ship showed up. The aliens exchanged glances. The story was impressive, if true, but it stretched belief. Zarani clicked her mandibles again. And I suppose these Marines suffered no casualties? Fought perfectly for 6 days? Morrison's expression grew serious. They lost 87 Marines, nearly a third of the force. But the station held, and 4,000 civilians lived because of it. It is a good story, Commander Vexthul said diplomatically. Humans value courage, clearly. But his tone suggested he thought it was just a story. The other aliens nodded agreement, their body language showing polite disbelief. Gaxlan tried to be respectful. Perhaps the numbers grew larger in the telling over time. Stories often do. Or maybe the pirates were not as fierce as claimed, Zarani added with obvious scorn. Real warriors would have taken the station in hours, regardless of defensive positions. The young Kethfer soldiers laughed at this, finding the idea of mammals holding off superior numbers amusing. Even some of the other species smiled at what they saw as typical human exaggeration. Morrison just shrugged and went back to cleaning his weapon. Like I said, we have some stories. Amy Carter watched the aliens dismiss the tale with growing irritation, but she kept quiet. Pete Rodriguez caught her eye and shook his head slightly, warning her not to start an argument. Dr. Bennett tried to defend her species. Human military history contains many examples of small forces holding against larger ones. The Battle of Thermopylae, the Alamo, Rocks Drift. More stories, Zarani clicked dismissively. Mammals tell themselves tales to feel brave, but reality is different. In real combat, you need strength, speed, proper weapons, not fairy tales about impossible victories. The conversation moved on to other topics, but the damage was done. The aliens had heard a human war story and found it lacking. Worse, they had made their opinion clear to everyone present. Morrison continued cleaning his sidearm, but Amy Carter noticed his jaw was set tight. Pete Rodriguez shuffled his cards with more force than necessary. The humans had been judged and found wanting by their supposed allies. The long journey to the outer rim continued, but something had changed in the recreation bay. Lines had been drawn, even if no one wanted to admit it yet. 3 days after the storytelling session, alarm bells rang through the starbound horizon. Captain Morrison sat up in his bunk as red lights flashed in the corridors. The ship's intercom crackled to life with Commander Vexthil's voice. "All troops to stations. We have received a distress call from Zarian Prime Mining Colony. Hostile forces have taken civilian hostages. This is not a drill." Morrison pulled on his boots and grabbed his gear. Around him, other human soldiers were doing the same. Amy Carter was already fully dressed, studying tactical data on her portable screen. Pete Rodriguez checked his weapon with practiced ease. "Looks like we get to see some action," Pete said. Slinging his rifle over his shoulder, the humans made their way to the main briefing room. Alien soldiers filled the space, their different species creating a mix of sizes, colors, and equipment. The Glumd Kefver stood tall with their reptilian heads held high. The Hive-Tar clicked their mandibles nervously. The Break-Tall remained stone-faced as always. Commander Vexthul stood at the front of the room next to a holographic display. The image showed a small planet with several moons. Zarian Prime is a mining world in the neutral zone. Population of 8,000 civilians, mostly miners and their families. The display zoomed in on the planet's surface, showing the layout of the mining colony. Intelligence reports suggest a small raider force has occupied the main settlement. Estimated 50 to 70 hostiles. They are demanding ransom for the civilians. Sub-Commander Zarani raised one of her forearms. "What kind of raiders are we facing?" "Unknown species, but poorly equipped according to our scans. This should be a simple operation for a force of our size and training." Vextho looked confident. "We will drop in 3 groups, surround the settlement, and eliminate the hostiles while protecting the civilians." Morrison studied the tactical display. Something felt wrong, but he could not put his finger on what. Amy Carter was frowning at her datapad, running calculations. "Questions?" Vexthel asked. Gaxlan raised his hand. "Commander, will this be combat experience for the newer troops?" "Yes, Trooper. This mission will be good practice for our mixed unit operations." Vexthel seemed pleased. "We can test our coordination against a real enemy force." The briefing ended and soldiers began preparing for the drop. Morrison found Amy Carter in the equipment bay, still studying her data. "Something bothering you?" "Lieutenant," he asked. Amy looked up, her blue eyes troubled. "The numbers don't add up, Captain. Why would 50 raiders attack a mining colony? The ransom demand is small compared to the risk." "Maybe they are desperate," Pete Rodriguez suggested. "Joining them, pirates take what they can get. Or maybe they are not very smart," Dr. Bennett added. She was checking her medical supplies, preparing to treat any wounded from the mission. Morrison nodded, but the feeling that something was wrong stayed with him. He had learned to trust his instincts over 20 years of combat. The Starbound Horizon dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zirian system. Immediately, sensors began screaming warnings. The bridge crew shouted reports over the intercom. Multiple contacts. "Large fleet detected. We are surrounded. Repeat, we are surrounded." Morrison felt his stomach drop as the ship shuddered under. Weapons fire. Through the nearest viewport, he could see the dark shapes of enemy vessels. Not the small raider force they expected, but a massive fleet of warships. All hands brace for impact. The ship's captain announced. Explosions rocked the starbound horizon as enemy fire tore through the hull. Lights flickered and went out. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red light. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making soldiers stumble. Morrison grabbed a wall support as another blast shook the ship. Around him, alien soldiers were shouting in their different languages. Some were calling for their gods, others for their mothers. Void Reapers, Commander Vexthul's voice, came over the intercom, tight with fear. We have walked into a trap. The entire Zarian system is controlled by a Void Reaper fleet. Morrison's blood ran cold. The Void Reapers were the most feared pirates in the galaxy. They were not desperate raiders, but a well-organized military force that had been terrorizing the Outer Rim for years. Another explosion sent sparks flying through the equipment bay. The ship's engines went silent, leaving them drifting in space. Emergency systems began failing one by one. Hull breach on decks 4 and 5, came a damage report. Engineering is offline. We have lost main power. Through the viewport, Morrison could see the enemy fleet moving into position around them. Dozens of warships, each one larger and better armed than the starbound horizon. They were completely surrounded with no chance of escape. How many ships? Amy Carter asked, her voice steady despite the situation. Scanner shows 47 vessels, came the reply from the bridge. Estimated crew of 2,000 combat troops, plus support personnel. The recreation bay had become a makeshift command center. Soldiers from all species gathered around Commander Vexthul, waiting for orders. Many of the aliens looked scared. Some were shaking, others were making prayers to their gods. What are our options? Sub-Commander Zarani asked. Her usual confidence was gone. Commander Vexthul studied the tactical display with trembling hands. We have 300 troops total. The enemy has over 2,000. Our ship is disabled, and we cannot call for help. Can we fight our way out? Gaxlan asked, though his voice lacked conviction. Fight 2,000 Void Reapers with 300 soldiers? Zarani's mandibles clicked in disbelief. That is suicide. The young Kethver trooper looked around the room desperately. But we are Alliance soldiers. We have training, superior equipment. Training means nothing against those odds, a break toll officer rumbled. The Void Reapers are experienced killers. They have been raiding the Outer Rim for decades. Morrison watched the alien soldiers as fear began to take hold. Species that had seemed fierce in the recreation bay now looked at each other with growing panic. The Hivetar were clicking nervously. The Kethver were hissing in their own language. Even the stone-faced Braktol seemed shaken. Perhaps we should consider surrender, one of the Nethka officers suggested through his environmental suit speaker. The Void Reapers sometimes take prisoners for ransom. They also sometimes space entire crews for entertainment. Commander Vexthul replied grimly. The debate continued as more damage reports came in. The ship was dying around them, systems failing one by one. Soon they would lose life support entirely. Dr. Bennett worked on treating injured crew members while listening to the arguments. How long do we have before the ship becomes uninhabitable? She asked. Maybe 6 hours, came the reply from engineering. Less if we lose the backup power core. Morrison looked at his fellow humans. Amy Carter was studying the tactical situation with intense focus. Pete Rodriguez was checking his weapon and ammunition. None of them looked afraid, just determined. The contrast with the alien soldiers was stark. While the other species argued about surrender or debated impossible escape plans, the humans were preparing for whatever came next. There is another option, Amy Carter said quietly. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the young human lieutenant. She stood up, her data pad in hand. "The mining colony," she said. "If we can reach the surface, we might be able to fortify positions there." Zaranes. Mandibles clicked in dismissal. "You want to fight 2,000 Void Reapers from a mining colony?" "The colony has defensive advantages," Amy continued, ignoring the sarcasm. "Underground tunnels, industrial equipment we can use as weapons, multiple escape routes." "That is insane," Gaxlon said. "We would be trapped on the surface with no way out." "We are already trapped," Morrison pointed out. "At least on the surface we have room to maneuver." Commander Vexthul shook his head. "Lieutenant Carter, I appreciate your courage, but what you suggest is impossible. A few hundred soldiers cannot hold against such numbers." "Not if we fight them straight up," Amy agreed. "But if we use the terrain, force them into close combat. In the tunnels, make every meter cost them dearly." The alien officers exchanged glances. They clearly thought the human was talking nonsense. "Even if we could reach the surface," Zarani said, "how long could we possibly hold? A few hours? A day at most?" Amy looked directly at her. "Long enough for rescue to arrive." "What rescue?" Commander Vexthul asked. "Our communications are down. No one knows we are here." "The Alliance will notice when we miss our scheduled check-in," Pete Rodriguez said. "They will send ships to investigate." "In 3 days," Vexthul replied. "We would need to hold for 3 days minimum." The room fell silent again. 3 days against 2,000 Void Reapers seemed impossible to every alien in the room. "It cannot be done," Gaxlar said finally. "No force has ever held against such odds for so long." Morrison caught Amy's eye and nodded slightly. She understood. "Actually," Morrison said quietly, "it has been done before." The aliens turned to stare at him. Even in their desperate situation, they seemed to realize what he was suggesting. "Not your Kepler station story again," Zarani clicked dismissively. "We do not have time for human fairy tales." But Morrison was already moving toward the equipment lockers. "Pete, Amy, Doc, get your gear. We are going to show them how it's done." The other humans followed without question. Amy Carter began accessing the colony's layout on her data pad. Pete Rodriguez distributed AM. The escape pods launched from the dying starbound horizon, just as the Void Reaper boarding parties reached the docking bays. Commander Vexthul had finally agreed to Amy Carter's plan, though his doubt showed in every word he spoke. Morrison watched through the small viewport as their ship exploded behind them. The Void Reapers had decided to destroy it rather than capture it. Good, he thought. That meant they were angry about losing their prize. The pods carrying 300 Alliance soldiers streaked toward Zarian Prime's surface. Behind them, the massive enemy fleet began moving into orbital positions. The Void Reapers were not worried about a few hundred survivors on the planet below. "Landing in 30 seconds, the pod's automated system announced. Morrison braced himself as the pod hit atmosphere. Around him, alien soldiers gripped their harnesses with fear. Many had never been in real combat before. The training exercises back at base had not prepared them for this. Amy Carter sat across from him, still studying her datapad. Even during the violent descent, she was working on defensive plans. Pete Rodriguez checked his weapon for the 10th time. Dr. Bennett secured her medical supplies. The pod crashed into the sandy ground outside. The mining colony with bone-jarring force. Morrison was first out, his rifle ready. The other humans followed quickly, forming a defensive perimeter. While the aliens stumbled from their pods, the mining colony spread before them like a small city. Metal buildings rose from the desert floor, connected by walkways and transport tubes. Massive mining equipment sat idle in the yards. Conveyor belts and processing plants created a maze of industrial structures. "Where are the civilians?" Gaxalon asked, looking around nervously. "Underground," Amy Carter replied, checking her scanner. The Void Reapers herded them into the mine tunnels, probably using them as human shields. Morrison studied the colony layout. Amy was right about the defensive possibilities. The industrial buildings would break up enemy formations. The underground tunnels could hide defenders and provide escape routes, but it would take work to turn this place into a fortress. "We have maybe 2 hours before they start landing troops," he said to Commander Vexthul. "We need to get started." The HFY commander looked overwhelmed. "Started with what?" "We have no heavy weapons, no vehicles, no fortifications. We make them," Morrison replied simply. He turned to Amy Carter. "Lieutenant, what do you need?" Amy's eyes lit up as she switched into tactical mode. "First, we need to map all the tunnel systems. The mines go deep, probably connect to multiple surface exits. We can use them for supply lines and surprise attacks." She pointed to different parts of the colony. "Second, we need to turn these buildings into strongpoints. Block the streets, create overlapping fields of fire. Make them fight for every meter." Morrison nodded and looked at Pete Rodriguez. "Sergeant, take half the humans and start setting up defensive positions. Use whatever you can find." "On it, Captain," Pete replied. Already moving toward the nearest building. Dr. Bennett was examining the colony's medical facility. "The hospital is well equipped. I can set up triage stations in the tunnels, close to the fighting but protected." Morrison watched the aliens standing around uncertainly while his humans got to work. The difference was striking. The humans had immediately started solving problems, while the aliens were still trying to understand the situation. "Commander Vexthul," Morrison said, "we need your people organized into teams. Defenders, scouts, engineers." The HFY commander looked confused. "Engineers? We are soldiers, not construction workers." "Today we are whatever we need to be," Morrison replied. He pointed to the mining equipment. "Those machines can move tons of rock and metal. We can use them to build barriers, block roads, create choke points." Amy Carter had found the colony's main computer system. Her fingers flew over the controls as she accessed building plans and tunnel maps. "Captain, the mine system is perfect. 3 main levels, dozens of side tunnels, multiple exits scattered across kilometers. Can we defend it?" Morrison asked. "Better than that. We can use it to hit them from behind while they are attacking our surface positions." Amy's tactical mind was working at full speed. Classic defense in depth. Make them think they are winning up top while we cut them apart from below. Sub-Commander Zarani approached them, her mandibles clicking nervously. "You humans seem very confident for people facing certain death." Morrison looked at her calmly. "We are not facing death. We are facing a fight. The difference being, in a fight you can win." Zarani's compound eyes studied him. "You really believe you can defeat 2,000 Void Reapers?" "I believe we can make them regret coming here," Morrison replied. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. The humans worked with focused efficiency that amazed their alien allies. Pete Rodriguez had organized teams to move equipment and build barriers. Some aliens joined in, following the humans' lead. Amy Carter turned the colony's communication center into a command post. She had detailed maps of every tunnel, every building, every possible defensive position. Her planning was so thorough that even Commander Vexthul began to look hopeful. "The key is making them come to us," Amy explained to the assembled officers. "We cannot win in open battle, but we can win in urban combat. Every street becomes a trap, every building a fortress." Morrison watched young Gaxlon helping to move mining equipment. The HFY trooper was working alongside Pete Rodriguez, learning human techniques for building defensive positions. The alien was asking questions, eager to understand. "Why do you do it this way?" Gaxlon asked as they stacked metal plates. "To create a machine gun nest. Because it works," Pete replied. "Human armies have been doing this for thousands of years." When you are outnumbered, you make the enemy come to you. Use the terrain, make them fight on your terms. Dr. Bennett had set up multiple medical stations throughout the tunnel system. She was teaching alien medics human techniques for treating battlefield injuries. The doctor worked with calm efficiency, preparing for the casualties that would come. Human. Medical doctrine emphasizes keeping fighters in the battle, she explained to a Hive-Tar medic. Quick treatment, pain management, return to duty. In extended combat, every soldier matters. The alien medic watched her work with growing respect. Your species has clearly thought deeply about warfare. We have had a lot of practice, Doctor. Bennett replied sadly. As the second hour passed, the colony transformation became obvious. What had been a peaceful mining settlement was now a military fortress. Streets were blocked with equipment and debris. Buildings had been turned into strongpoints with overlapping fields of fire. The tunnel system was mapped and prepared for defensive operations. Most importantly, the mixed force of soldiers was working together. The aliens had stopped questioning human methods and started learning them. Gaxalon was becoming an expert in urban defense. Even Zarani was helping to position weapons and plan ambush sites. Commander Vexthul found Morrison on the command center's roof, watching the horizon through binoculars. The transformation is remarkable, the Kethver commander said. I have never seen soldiers work so efficiently under pressure. Morrison lowered his binoculars. We had good teachers. Who taught you? History, Morrison replied. Every human soldier learns about the battles where small forces held against large ones. Thermopylae, the Alamo, Rock's Drift. We study what worked and what failed. Vexthul considered this. Your species has fought many such battles. 2. Many, Morrison said, but each one taught us something. How to hold ground, how to make the enemy pay for every advance, how to keep fighting when victory seems impossible. A communication alert interrupted them. Amy Carter's voice came over. The intercom system she had rigged throughout the colony. Enemy dropships inbound. Multiple contacts. Estimated time to landing is 15 minutes. All units to defensive positions. Morrison picked up his rifle and headed for the stairs. Time to see if our work pays off. Commander Vexthil followed. Him. Captain, may I ask you something? What is it? Do you really think we can hold for 3 days? Morrison paused at the top of the stairs. Around them, alien and human soldiers were moving to their positions with calm determination. The panic from the ship was gone, replaced by focused purpose. Commander, 3 days ago your people thought my story about Kepler Station was impossible. Tonight, we are going to show you that impossible is just another word for difficult. The first enemy dropships appeared on the horizon, black shapes against the setting sun. The Void Reapers were coming in force, confident that a few hundred survivors would be easy prey. Morrison reached his position in the main defensive line. Amy Carter was in the command center, coordinating the defense. Pete Rodriguez held the southern approach with a mixed team of humans and Kethver. Dr. Bennett was ready in the medical stations. All units, this is command. Amy's voice came over the radio. Enemy landing in progress. Remember your training. Make every shot count. Hold your positions until ordered to fall back. Morrison watched through his scope as the first Void Reaper troops began deploying from their ships. They moved with the confidence of veterans who had never faced serious resistance. They expected to sweep through the colony in hours. Here they come. Pete's voice crackled over the radio. Lee. The first attack came at dawn on the second day. Morrison had been awake for 36 hours straight, moving between defensive positions and checking on his troops. His eyes were red with exhaustion, but his hands remained steady on his rifle. Void Reapers had learned quickly that the mining colony was not easy prey. Their first assault the previous evening had cost them over 100 soldiers. Bodies littered the approaches to the colony, proof that the defenders had sharp teeth. Movement on the eastern approach. Amy Carter's voice crackled over the radio. She had not left the command center since the fighting began, surviving on coffee and determination. 200 hostiles moving through the equipment yard. Morrison adjusted his scope and saw them. Void Reaper infantry advancing in good order, using the mining machinery for cover. They had learned to respect the defenders after yesterday's bloody lesson. Let them get close, Morrison spoke into his radio. Wait for the signal. The enemy soldiers moved carefully through the maze of conveyor belts and processing equipment. They expected ambush now, checking every corner and shadow. But Amy Carter had planned for this. Now, Morrison said quietly, explosions erupted. Throughout the equipment yard as the humans triggered mining charges they had placed during the night. Massive machines toppled over, crushing enemy soldiers beneath tons of metal. The survivors found themselves trapped in a killing ground with nowhere to hide. The defenders opened fire from concealed positions. Morrison's shot took down an enemy officer trying to rally his troops. Around him, Gaxlon and 2 other Kethvar soldiers were firing with increasing accuracy. The young alien had learned well from his human teachers. Good shooting, Morrison told Gaxlon as the alien reloaded his weapon. I am beginning to understand, Gaxlon replied, his golden scales now dirty with smoke and dust. You do not fight them directly. You make them come to you, then hurt them badly. The attack lasted 2 hours. When it ended, the Void Reapers had gained maybe 50 meters of ground at the cost of another 100 soldiers. The defenders had lost only 12 fighters, though many more were wounded. Dr. Bennett worked without rest in her underground medical stations. She had learned to perform surgery while explosions shook dirt from the tunnel ceiling. Alien and human wounded lay side by side as she fought to save every life she could. How many pain suppressors do we have left? She asked her Hivetar assistant. Enough for 2 more days, if we are careful, the alien medic replied. He had stopped questioning human medical techniques after watching Dr. Bennett save lives that would have been lost using standard alien procedures. Make them last, Dr. Bennett said, moving to the next patient. The fighting is going to get worse. Commander Vexthal found Morrison during a brief lull in the combat. The Kethver commander looked exhausted and confused. Captain, I do not understand what is happening here. Morrison was cleaning his rifle while keeping watch on the enemy positions. What do you mean? We should have been overrun hours ago. The numbers, the enemy experience, everything says we should be dead. Vexthal sat down heavily beside him, yet here we are, still fighting. Welcome to human warfare, Morrison replied. The enemy expected to walk through us. Instead, every step forward cost them blood. Eventually, they will start wondering if this place is worth the price. Sub-Commander Zarani approached their position, moving with the careful step of someone who had learned to fear sniper fire. Her blue-black armor was scratched and dented from 2 days of combat. The southern tunnel entrance is secure, she reported. But the enemy is adapting. They are bringing up heavier weapons. Morrison nodded. How are your troops holding up? Zarani's mandibles clicked in what might have been amazement. Better than I expected. The humans you assigned to my unit are remarkable. They fight when they should be dead from exhaustion. It was true. Pete Rodriguez had been in continuous combat for 40 hours, yet he still moved with purpose and precision. When aliens asked how he kept going, he just shrugged and said it was part of the job. Amy Carter's voice came over the radio again. All units, prepare for another assault. Heavy weapons detected moving into position. The second attack of the day began with artillery fire. The Void Reapers had brought up portable cannons and were trying to blast their way through the defensive positions. Explosions rocked the colony as shells tore into buildings and equipment. Morrison felt the ground shake as a shell landed nearby. Debris rained down from the ceiling of his position. Through the smoke and dust, he could see enemy soldiers advancing behind the barrage. "Fall back to secondary positions," Amy ordered over the radio. "Let them take the outer defenses." This was part of her plan. The outer positions were meant to be abandoned after inflicting casualties. The real defensive line was deeper in the colony, where the enemy would face even more concentrated fire. Morrison and his team withdrew through predetermined routes, taking their wounded with them. They left behind booby traps and delayed explosives. To welcome the advancing enemy, the Void Reapers occupied the outer positions just as Amy triggered the surprises. Explosions tore through their ranks as hidden charges detonated. The survivors found themselves under fire from new positions they could not see clearly. "Phase 2 complete," Amy reported. "Enemy casualties estimated at 150. They have advanced 300 meters and gained nothing but rubble." The pattern continued through the day. The Void Reapers would attack, gain some ground, at terrible cost, then discover they were under fire from new positions. Each advance brought them deeper into Amy Carter's carefully planned killing zone. By evening, the enemy had lost over 600 soldiers. The defenders had lost 38 fighters, but every loss hurt more because of their small numbers. Morrison could see the strain in his troops' faces, both human and alien. Gaxlon had been fighting for 2 straight days with only brief rest periods. His golden scales were dark with dirt and dried blood. Yet when Morrison checked on him, the young Kethver was still alert and ready. "How do you do it?" Gaxlon asked. "How do humans fight so long without breaking?" Morrison considered the question carefully. "We fight for each other. When your friend needs you to keep shooting, you keep shooting. When someone is wounded and needs cover, you provide cover. The mission matters, but the person next to you matters more." The third day began with the heaviest assault yet. The Void Reapers had brought up their reserve forces and were determined to end the siege. Over 1,000 enemy soldiers attacked. Simultaneously from 3 directions, Amy Carter coordinated the defense from her command center, directing troops and resources with incredible precision. She had not slept more than 4 hours total since the fighting began, but her tactical mind remained sharp. "Northern Line is under heavy pressure," she reported, redirecting tunnel teams to hit them from behind. Morrison watched through his scope as human and alien soldiers emerged from hidden tunnel exits behind the enemy lines. The surprise attacks threw the Void Reaper assault into confusion. Just when they thought victory was within reach, Dr. Bennett had moved her primary medical station deeper underground as the fighting intensified. She was operating on patients while the sound of battle echoed through the tunnels above her. Her hands never shook, even when explosions made the lights flicker. "Another team of wounded coming down," her Hive Tar assistant reported. "Ready the next surgery station," Dr. Bennett replied, not looking up from her current patient. "We keep them fighting." The aliens who had mocked human stories 3 days ago were now fighting with the same desperate determination they had seen in their human allies. Zarani led a counterattack that drove the enemy back from a critical position. Commander Vex Thul personally carried ammunition to frontline fighters under heavy fire. As the third day wore on, something changed in the enemy's behavior. Their attacks became more cautious, less aggressive. The Void Reapers were beginning to realize that taking this mining colony might cost them their entire force. "They are wavering," Amy observed during a brief planning session. "Morale is breaking down. They expected easy victory, not a meat grinder." Morrison cleaned blood from a cut on his forehead and nodded. "How many do we estimate they have lost?" "Over 800 confirmed, probably more." Amy's voice carried exhaustion but also satisfaction. "They started with 2,000 troops. We have hurt them badly." Pete Rodriguez joined them, his uniform torn and dirty. "Captain, the men are asking how much longer we need to hold." Morrison looked at his old friend. Pete had been fighting beside him for 15 years, through battles across human space. He had never seen the tough sergeant look so worn down. "Relief should arrive tomorrow," Morrison said. "Can we hold one more day?" Pete Rodriguez straightened his shoulders. "We will hold as long as needed, sir. The aliens are fighting like humans. Now, they understand what it means." As night fell on the third day, the surviving defenders prepared for what might be their final battle. They had proven that Morrison's story about Kepler Station was not just possible, but repeatable. The question now was whether they would live to tell their own tale. In the command center, Amy Carter studied the tactical situation one more time. Tomorrow would bring the ultimate test of everything they had built and learned together. The Siege of Zarian Prime had become legend in the eye. The 7th day of the siege began with the heaviest bombardment yet. The Void Reapers had decided to level the entire mining colony rather than continue losing soldiers in ground combat. Artillery shells rained down on the defensive positions. As the enemy prepared for one final assault, Morrison crouched in what remained of his command bunker, feeling each explosion shake dust from the concrete ceiling. His ammunition was running low, and his rifle had a crack in the stock from shrapnel. Around him, the surviving defenders looked like ghosts of their former selves. Amy Carter's voice came over the damaged radio system, weaker now due to equipment. "Failures. All units, prepare for final defensive positions. This is likely their last push before they retreat or we run out of ammunition." Through the smoke and debris, Morrison could see the massive enemy force gathering for the attack. Nearly 1,000 Void Reapers remained, and they were bringing everything they had left. Tanks, artillery, air support, all focused on crushing the stubborn defenders once and for all. Gaxlon crawled over to Morrison's position, his golden scales now permanently darkened by dirt and battle damage. The young Kethver had aged years. In the past week, transformed from an eager recruit into a seasoned warrior. "Captain, how many rounds do you have left?" Gaxlon asked. Morrison checked his remaining magazines. 18 bullets, you?" 23, Gaxlon replied. "Do you think it will be enough?" Morrison looked at the alien soldier who had once laughed at human war stories. "It will have to be." Dr. Bennett was treating wounded in the deepest part of the tunnel system, using supplies scavenged from the ruins above. She had saved dozens of lives over the past week, working miracles with limited resources. But even she could not treat soldiers who had no bullets left to fight with. Pete Rodriguez found Morrison as the enemy bombardment reached its peak. The veteran sergeant looked like he had been through a war, which he had. His uniform was more patches than original fabric, and his face was drawn with exhaustion. "Jake, the southern line is about to break," Pete reported. "Zarani is holding with 8 fighters, but they cannot last much longer." Morrison nodded grimly. Sub-Commander Zarani had become one of their best defenders, leading desperate counterattacks with the same determination she had once reserved for mocking human capabilities. The irony was not lost on anyone. "Fall back to the final perimeter," Morrison ordered. "We make our last stand at the command center." As the defenders withdrew to their final positions, Morrison reflected on the past week. They had held longer than anyone thought possible. The Void Reapers had lost over 1,200 soldiers trying to take a mining colony that should have fallen in hours, but numbers were numbers. The enemy still had enough troops to overwhelm the handful of survivors, and the defenders were almost out of ammunition. In another hour, maybe 2, the Battle of Zarian Prime would be over. Amy Carter had moved her command post to the deepest tunnel, where a few dozen fighters prepared for the final assault. Her tactical genius had kept them alive this long, but even she could not create bullets from empty air. "Captain," she said as Morrison joined her, "I estimate we have 45 minutes of combat time remaining. After that, we switch to hand-to-hand weapons." The radio crackled with static, then suddenly cleared with an incoming transmission on an Alliance frequency. Zarian Prime Defenders, this is Strike Force Alpha. Please respond. Morrison grabbed the radio handset with disbelief. Strike Force Alpha, this is Captain Morrison. We are still holding but critically low on supplies and ammunition. Understood, Captain. Relief is incoming. War Master Thekmer sends his compliments and asks that you hold for 10 more minutes. The transmission ended, leaving stunned silence in the tunnel. War Master Thekmer was the most legendary warrior in the galaxy, a living symbol of military excellence. If he was coming personally, it meant the Alliance was taking this situation very seriously. 10 more minutes, Morrison announced to his fighters. Relief is coming. The final Void Reaper assault began, just as Alliance ships appeared in the sky above. But the enemy was committed now, throwing everything they had at the battered defenders. Morrison and his team fought with their last rounds while explosions from the space battle above shook the ground. GAX single quotes Lon was down to his final bullets when the first Alliance drop pods began landing outside the colony. Through his scope, Morrison could see fresh troops deploying with heavy weapons and full ammunition loads. The Void Reapers found themselves caught between the surviving defenders and a relief force led by the most feared military commander in known space. The pirates who had expected easy victory were now trapped in a tactical nightmare. Within an hour, the battle was over. The surviving Void Reapers surrendered or fled, their invasion force shattered by a week of brutal combat. The mining colony of Zarian Prime remained in Alliance hands, though barely recognizable under the damage from the siege. Morrison sat on a pile of rubble, finally allowing himself to feel the exhaustion that had been building for 7 days. Around him, medics from the relief force treated the wounded defenders. The cost had been terrible, but they had held. Dr. Bennett emerged from the tunnels, supporting a wounded Hivetar soldier. She looked like she had not slept in days, which was probably true. Behind her came more survivors, both human and alien, all bearing the marks of extended combat. Amy Carter was briefing the relief force commanders on the tactical situation, her mind still working even though her body was ready to collapse. Pete Rodriguez was helping to account for survivors and casualties, ensuring no one was left behind. A figure approached Morrison through the smoke and debris. Even before he looked up, Morrison knew who it was. War Master Thekmer was unmistakable, even among the Kethver species. Ancient scars covered his dark scales, and his presence commanded instant respect from every soldier nearby. Captain Morrison, the War Master said, his voice carrying authority that made everyone in earshot stand straighter. Morrison struggled to his feet and saluted. War Master, thank you for the timely rescue. Thekmer studied Morrison with eyes that had seen centuries of warfare. The rescue was well earned, Captain. Your defense of this position will be studied in military academies for generations. The other survivors gathered around as word spread that the legendary War Master was speaking with their human commander, Gaxlan Zerani, Commander Vextho, and dozens of other alien soldiers listened intently. War Master, Morrison said, my troops fought with honor. All of them, every species. Yes, they did, Thekmer agreed. But I did not come here just to congratulate brave soldiers. I came because of a story I heard was being told aboard your ship. Morrison felt a chill of recognition. Sir? Thekmer's scarred features showed what might have been amusement. The story of Kepler Station. I understand some soldiers found it difficult to believe. The gathered aliens exchanged uncomfortable glances. In the aftermath of their own impossible defense, Morrison's tale seemed much more credible. I was there, Captain Morrison, Thekmer continued, his voice carrying across the ruins. 20 years ago, as a young observer with the Alliance Relief Fleet, we arrived 3 hours too late to help, but in time to witness the aftermath. Complete silence fell over the group. Even the medics stopped their work to listen. What we found defied military logic, the War Master said. A single human battalion had held Kepler Station for 6 days against impossible odds. The enemy had lost over 3,000 soldiers trying to take what should have been an easy target. Gaxelin's eyes widened with realization. The story was true, every word, Vecmer confirmed. But Captain Morrison was modest in his telling. The defense was even more remarkable than he described. I spent days studying the battle sites, trying to understand how such a small force had achieved so much. Zarani's mandibles clicked softly. You mean humans really can fight like that? I learned more about warfare from studying that human defense than from any battle in my long career, Vecmer replied. The tactical innovations, the use of improvised weapons, the refusal to surrender despite hopeless odds. It changed how I approach combat. The War Master turned to address all the survivors. What you have accomplished here at Zarian Prime equals or exceeds the legend of Kepler Station. You have shown that the human way of war can be learned and adopted by any species, willing to fight for something greater than themselves. Morrison found his voice. War Master, it was not just human tactics. Every species here contributed something vital. Exactly, Vecmer said with approval. You taught them not just how to fight, but why to fight. That is the true human gift to the Alliance. Commander Vexthal stepped forward hesitantly. War Master, what makes humans different in combat? Vecmer considered the question carefully. Other species fight with strength, speed, or natural weapons. Humans fight with something more dangerous, the absolute refusal to accept defeat when protecting others. They do not fight until they die. They fight until they win, or there is nothing left to protect. Dr. Bennett looked up from treating a patient. We just do what needs to be done. And that, said Vecmer, is why human stories seem impossible. To those who have never seen humans fight. As the evacuation continued, the survivors shared their own stories of the siege. Tales of impossible endurance, brilliant tactics, and courage beyond.